Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Okay. This is Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission regular workshop. Today is Tuesday, December 6th, 2022. It's 6:02 p.m. We're at the auditorium. And that's it. Our workshop's about budget tonight. And we were trying to discuss a little bit about hiring. So because we don't have to worry about agenda in a workshop, I want to quickly say about the hiring thing. If you have any questions about the process, like
Yeah,
Kim,
okay,
make
good.
sure you ask her. And you said you've already talked to Jerry with HR, so you all got, okay. I want to know, so. I'm going to make sure y'all knew that you just make that clear that y'all could use them for resources for questions too. Okay, so budget. I'm hoping tonight we'll get all our questions answered so we can be ready to vote. Is this our last time with Scott formally?
Yes.
It is. Stephen Dickey is out there somewhere. He is paying attention so he can hear what we're up to. And that's it. Would you like to just go ahead and start, Scott?
Yeah, and I should give a couple of preliminaries to let you know where we are. There's a lot of things that have to be done in the last month or so of the year, virtually all of which is done. So I just want to let you know that I emailed all of you the year-end report, which you mentioned Stephen Dickey. He helped. In fact, the majority of it was prepared by him with just a little guidance from me. So I thank you, Steve. I had a lot going on, but that's required by our manual, and it's just to inform you of where we are, but on various things. But I would encourage you to at least, to read in depth, but at least skim the things like the work, the status, condition and status of our assets, because it'll define the work that really has to be done over the next year and will help to realize what the priorities are for next year. It has the work that we propose for next year, and so that will help. When you're looking, for instance, at a general category like, general maintenance, and you're wondering, well, why am I asking for $30,000? If you look through that condition and status of assets and then the proposed work for next year, it'll help give you a feel for, well, what is it that we're looking to do that's going to cost that amount of money? So I did send that to you all earlier this afternoon. We are current on all of our reconciliations for our bank accounts. In fact, Mark is the one that reviews those. He came in, he reviewed them all today. So everything is good there. I assume everything was good. Mark, I think everything was good. Yeah. I had to step out, and so I don't recall whether
Wish we had more money.
And so really the only thing that's left to do that is required to be done is after January 1st, and I won't be here. So after January 1st, when we do our last reconciliation for the year, somebody will have to put together the last quarterly financial statement for the year. I have shown Stephen how to do that, where the files are, where the templates are, and how to run the two reports that get attached. We attach a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. So basically we're set for a smooth transition. I think you all have my phone number. I'm available for questions or anything. Please, don't hesitate to call, within reason. So the point is, I think we're very well situated for a smooth transition. That being said, I wanted to look at...
Let me interrupt you real quick, Scott.
Yes.
Would y'all like to have Stephen sit up here with us,
Why not?
if he'd like to? Stephen, would you like to sit up here with us? Would it make it easier for you to listen to what we're saying and be...
Yeah, I'll sit down there then.
Thank you. Since,
Just way up.
yes, up there.
Stephen, if you would also introduce yourself. I don't know you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my name is Steve Dickey. I've worked with...
Mike.
I have to do the Mikey thing. Blue light means a tone, I assume. Okay. My name is Steve Dickey. I've worked since, 2020, I guess, with Scott in a volunteer status, then in a contractor status, and kind of a mix of those. And a lot of it just started with glades, looking at trying to restore glades in the park. And it kind of went from there. We enjoy each other's company and working together, and he allowed me to work on some projects, and then he kind of brought me into understanding various aspects about the park, and it's mainly, for me, it's attuned to the restoration efforts. So, and I've been here, I guess, in Eureka Springs, maybe 3.5 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, good. And I thought you can help the transition by being up on the table by listening to us. Okay, Scott.
Yeah.
And this is important to let you know, even though we're here talking budget, this is important so you know that budget and otherwise, we are ready for a smooth transition, even though we don't know who the new director will be. Stephen, one of the projects that we hired him to do was to look at all of our operations and create operations manuals that talked about all of our procedures. And it's everything down to, he created a system, for instance, for passwords. When I'm gone, and let's say it was something suddenly not well planned, there's an encrypted file that only 2 people, I think actually 3, including the chairperson, have access to, that gives you access to all of our passwords, for instance, but it's encrypted, no one else can get to it. So things like that were put together, and it's going to enable us to make a smooth transition, and Stephen will be able to help to train whoever the new director will be. So he has a depth of knowledge that no one else, myself included, in parks has. Now, my knowledge, I think, may be a little broader in a lot of ways, but he's the one that knows how to, fix a computer if we're not complying with some of the security requirements that are imposed on us by the auditors, for instance. He's the one that fixed those things. So that would be his role, is helping to pass on some of that institutional knowledge to whoever the new director will be. So I'm glad we have him there. So that being said, one last thing I'll say to put this in our context for our budget. I did print a profit and loss statement today. In fact, I printed one for each of you if you'd like. Just to let you know where we are today, because when we started the budget process, we were 2 months before the end of the year, and so we had to extrapolate some things to try to guess where we would be at the end of the year. I want to point out, if you look at our account number 420, the sales and use tax that we received, the 1/8 cent sales and use tax, we are a little short of where I had projected, but we're still missing. We haven't received that tax from this for the last month, for November even, yet, from the city. And same thing with the 1/4% sales tax.
So
Yes.
why is there a deficit in the budget when you look at actuals? Oh, no, that's budget. Actuals was, you're anticipating a
Right.
200K.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we are going to be a little light there, but we don't know how much. So I think the proposed numbers that we have on, if you look at the budget, so we're going to focus almost exclusively on this document tonight, the one with the yellow highlights on a couple of areas. So if you look at column 2, 2022 annual, but estimated through the year, those were guesses of how our last 2 months are going to go.
Okay.
This P&L statement helps to get you a little closer to reality, because we are now in our last month. And I just wanted to point out those 2 big issues, that those 2 income items are still light because we just haven't received the money yet. So I think our guesses about where we should be that are on the document that we're going to be looking at tonight should still be pretty close. Okay, so that being said, what is your preference? Should I think we've already been through and summarized a lot of things.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Because previously we didn't have we had the estimated but not the budget.
Right.
On 455, there was proposed or planned in the budget 42K
Yes.
of income, and it was only 75. What was that income?
Well, at account 455, that was
Yes.
just other income from operations. And
That
that,
42K, what was the
well,
the thought
keep in
behind
mind, it was a budget item, but it was for things like, not grants necessarily, but sometimes we'll get donations for specific things, and sometimes large donations. I think the previous year, we had a donation or two that was large, but they weren't like grants, where they're more formal and reporting requirements. So it could be anything from that to things like, somebody has a special event that creates a fee. So that's a total guess. I mean, anytime we're looking at other, in quotes, income, it's just a catch-all for anything that's not specifically enumerated above.
And the amount for the shuttle income was less than expected, less than budgeted. Was there a reason for that, the line above, 450?
Yeah, there were a couple issues with budget, with shuttles this year. A lot of them having to do with unexpected maintenance, and that kept them unavailable for use.
Okay.
So we ended up, allowing the private shuttle operators
Okay.
from time to time operate when we would only be operating.
Oh.
So
Yep.
that was one of the biggest issues that I recall that we had a few times. So,
Okay.
yeah. Anything else?
I have a question. You had removed the amount for the Harding Springs stairs.
Yes.
Is that because you're expecting it to be completed this year?
Yes, I am so delighted to say
They're already doing it.
that if you go by there, you'll notice that the stairs are half torn out. The process, right, we've had budgeted 15,000, and that was based on an actual bid. We found somebody who was able to get started right away. I was able to look at some photos of similar type work that he did. It was, it was decent looking work. He was able to get out there right away, and he has started. So initially, even though it had been on this year's budget or approved separately, I don't recall which, it had been approved and planned for this year. I didn't think we were going to get it done, so I kicked the can down the road to next year, and we got lucky, and it should be done this year.
Cool.
Great.
Okay.
I have another question.
Yes.
On the second page, your credit card and vendor fees paid
Yes.
was more than double,
Yes.
and yet your income from operations was less than budgeted.
Yes.
Why?
The fees that are charged, and there's at least two companies. Square is one that we use for certain items, like things in the bait shop, if somebody comes in and buys a candy bar. For the shuttle operations, it's the Flybook is the name of the company. And so those fees come out of every transaction. Now, on the bright side, they get added back in, because when those fees are charged, it gets added to, in other words, it's paid by the customer who signs up. So that income actually gets added to the income from our shuttle operations.
So we just
So-
didn't budget enough, basically.
Yeah, and there were a couple of reasons. Number one, our personal, even though our budget, our income from shuttle operations was a little lower than I had anticipated, we had more of our own operations than we used to get more from the outsiders, the outside shuttle vendors, and we were doing more of our own shuttle operations this year. So it's just a matter of, we get $5 per rider from our private vendors. We get the whole amount of the fees when we are the shuttle operator. Of course, we have expenses to offset if we are the shuttle drivers, so. Yeah, and I would also say, things might get simplified. The one private operator that we have has expressed an interest in just taking over our shuttle operations. He had proposed that about 2 years ago. It didn't work at the time. We actually negotiated that, and we were unable to come to some terms on that. But in reality, that's something that the new director probably should explore, because we've been talking about it and talking about a framework wherein that would work. He's actually bought the hotel right up above. In fact, you can see his hotel right from the turnaround, the hub. He's that close. And so he has a lot to offer as far as that type of thing. So it's something that, although we were unable, and I was the one in negotiations with him, we were unable at the time to come to terms. A big part of that was because we couldn't arrive at a number that we were trying to come up with a target that we could use to gauge our success. In other words, we were going to make, as Parks, we would make X number of dollars or X percent of his, well, it was a new operation. We didn't know, we didn't have the numbers to be able to really negotiate with some degree of knowledge as to what to expect. But I think now the new director should look closely at that, because it does have some good, there was a lot of positives in doing that. And we just couldn't come to terms at the time. So I would urge the new director, whoever he or she may be, to at least explore that, and it would simplify things quite a bit.
Yeah. It's not core competency, really, shuttle driving.
Well, and not only that, it takes away, it's a distraction. We did turn it into a 2 years ago, it was a losing proposition for us.
Okay.
We are making money at it, so it has turned around, but that gives us a base work from which to be able to negotiate if we do end up negotiating a deal. We now know what the dollars are, or should be.
Right.
So that's for down the road, and that, of course, might affect the actual performance next year. But it's something to be explored, and I think Parks operations are so diverse, and we have so many irons in the fire. To have somebody who specializes in something take over and manage something is worth looking at again, and I would encourage the commission to do that next year.
Scott, I do have one question.
Yes.
The inspection repairs to drain valve in the dam,
Yes.
you took that out, but I was under the impression that that was a have to do. And my inclination is to put that back in. I mean, if it's a legal lawful requirement,
Yeah.
I feel like it should be in the budget.
I thought we talked about it, and that was where we ended up.
Yeah, I have questions about this, though, because I have heard about this deal, I think about a decade ago, when the state was about to close down the dam.
Yes.
I mean, I understood that not everything was fixed perfectly, but it was done enough that states were satisfied. Earlier this year, I was out at was it this year? Maybe it was the end of last year. I was out at the dam with both a federal and a state dam expert, and they were talking about the need to fix this valve, so I know it needs to be fixed. But I did not hear even the state guy saying, we're going to tear this down if it doesn't happen. And it wasn't in last year's budget. It wasn't brought up as an item that needed to get put in last year's budget. So I don't know, is there some new information you have that you're saying that it has to get fixed now?
Yeah, actually, there is. There's, first of all, so let's go back. I don't recall the year. It was several years ago. The state did have several issues with the dam. Most of those were done. In fact, that's when all the reinforcement was done. There was post-tension concrete system that was put in. In fact, you can see when you walk along the dam, you'll see holes about at least 12 inches in diameter, probably slightly more. That was what all that work
Yeah,
was.
that's what I
So
understood,
that-
yes.
So that solidified the dam. But there were a couple of other things that they did that were maintenance requirements. And this was in this is in a written order from, I don't recall the name of the agency that regulates dams, but that agency submitted an order that we had to do several things, including control the vegetation on the front of the dam site, or front of the dam, because they felt that was what was causing at least some of the deterioration of the stone on the front of the dam. So that's required yearly. The other thing that was required yearly is opening this gate. So I started asking staff that had been here for a while, oh, have we done that lately? It was explained that the last time they did it, and I couldn't get an accurate date, but that last time they did it, they were unable to get it closed. And they were seriously thinking that they were going to drain the lake, and they couldn't stop it. And so I'm certainly unwilling, under those circumstances, to go up and open the gate that is going to drain the lake if we can't get it back open. So I tried to find a company that could do it. I found one that gave me a bid. But it's also, this is a budget number, because I actually have a bid from them that
Right.
this is what it would cost. But they're an underwater construction company that would be sending divers down there to investigate before they even try to open it. They're going to visually inspect. There may be, in other words, if we put this in the budget, I say we still look at a couple of, alternatives. For instance, the dam inspectors from the state told me 2 years ago when I was out with them that they had a little underwater drone that they could take down there and look at it. So we might find some ways to reduce the actual cost of it. But this was the highest, because it's a bid, it's a firm bid, although they're not going to keep it open forever. We know that we can do it for that. Now, can we get the cost reduced? Sure.
Okay. So this bid that you have, this is for doing assessment, or is it doing assessment and fixing?
It's basically doing the assessment.
Right, 'cause
we don't know if there's anything that needs.
Right, because I was going to say, because I think I thought you said last time it was for fixing, and
Oh.
I can't imagine anybody fixing without having seen it,
Right.
giving a price for fixing without having seen it. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, there may not be a problem with it.
Right.
The people who opened it last time and couldn't close it, it was very well that sediment was still flushing through. But the other problem is, until somebody gets down there, either with
Right.
an underwater drone with a camera or a diver, they don't know, is the inlet or the intake down here and we have 5 feet of sediment above it?
Right.
Or is it 2 inches of sediment? If it's 5 feet, it's going to drain the lake before we can get it closed. So-
My biggest concern is, it's, for an example, in Texas, annually, we have to go get our car inspected, period.
Yes.
Man, nothing could be wrong with your car, it's period, but you have to have a sticker that says it was inspected,
Yes.
right? If this is a legal requirement for dams that says annually, we have to have this valve inspected, then by golly, we should be doing it annually and inspecting it.
Right.
So I don't know if that's legal, or if
Right.
that's an actual law that says you have to have it inspected once a year. If it is, then I'd like to know that. If it's not, and it's just smart for us to do, I
think it's an
The-
order.
The answer is exactly, the order that was issued that allowed us to keep the dam open required us to do certain things,
And that was it.
and that's one of them.
Oh, my.
Controlling the vegetation on the front was one of them. I would go a step further. So that's, to answer your question, yes, those are the things that came along, or that changed, is that I found this order from several years ago, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is an order, we need to comply with this. So as I started fact-finding, I found out why we haven't done it in the last year. But secondly, NRCS, when they sent their engineers out, and that was at least one of the meetings you were involved in,
Right.
we did a number of things, including looking at the original blueprints, did a whole lot of work, and they issued a report, which I thought I sent to all of you. If not, I certainly can. And they, first of all, on the bright side, is they gave us the thumbs up on the condition of the dam itself. In other words, it doesn't appear like it's going to fail imminently. But they did state two things that they saw that we needed to do. One was either keep the top of the dam closed as we have it now, or get the railings fixed. So they agreed it was unsafe to allow pedestrians to walk on the dam. So that's one of the reasons we have that closed right now. Secondly, they did say that we needed to do that, open that valve and test it once a year. So I don't think we're, say, out of compliance yet, but if we don't do it soon, we will be.
And if you don't do the assessment, you could be in a situation where you don't have time to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think,
I would
mean, I
say,
think that's my point. I feel like things that somebody has warned us about and told us to do, ordered us to do, I feel like we need to do.
lessons learned.
Yes.
Let's do.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
So there's one other issue I want to bring up. So I think it was the workshops, I think maybe the one in Scott's office where we were talking about budget. We had this whole discussion about cutting invasive plants. And we were saying that when we do that, we need to coordinate that with Olson because they're doing the assessment of the lake and we don't want to mess up what they're doing. And I don't know that doing an assessment, sending something down to look at the dam's going to be an issue, but if we start getting into repairs, that would seem like that would be a similar situation where we need to coordinate and make sure we're not affecting the assessment that Olson is doing of the conditions of the lake.
I remember
It
you.
would-
And I brought that up and I got shut down, and I just want someone to recognize this could be an issue, and if we approve this, that be taken under consideration, and that any work that is done on that dam is done in coordination with Olson, and we don't mess up
Makes sense.
the assessment they're doing.
It makes sense, Susan. I
Absolutely.
think, I'm sorry you felt shut down. I remember the conversation. I think it's because you were focusing on just and now I see why, if you thought we were talking about fixing as well as assessing.
Right.
This is just a budget item for looking at it.
Okay.
I thought that was clear. I understood it. Maybe you didn't understand. That's why you were saying that.
Well,
That's why it was unclear to me why you were
Well,
talking
I-
about the other stuff, because you weren't,
Yeah.
sending someone out to look wouldn't affect them.
Okay, well, I was asking, would water be let out of the dam, and I was told yes. So that would potentially affect the assessment.
But
Right.
that's after the assessment.
Right,
And,
yes.
Right,
and
but-
any
It has
potential
nothing to do with our
repairs.
budget decision here.
But-
But it is something to be considered later, yes, but not with this decision.
Okay.
but first of all, I agree with you 100%, especially coordinating with Olson. I think what makes sense is leave this item on the budget, but the new director should be instructed to do a couple of things. Number one, continue to look at cost-cutting features. For instance, we can talk with the company that did give us a bid and find out, are there some of these things that are luxuries and not requirements? But secondly, one of the things that they're doing is looking at the sediment issues in front of that gate. Well, one of the things that Olson is doing is taking sediment depths of the entire lake.
Right.
And so it could be that some of the work that would be done by the company I got a bid from, keep in mind, I got a bid only so I had a somewhat accurate number for budget purposes. We can come in, hopefully, we can lessen that. Olson may know somebody that can do that kind of work after they do the actual, because they're actually going to do core samples of the sediment to see how deep it is, what it is. Is it materials that can be, for instance, harvested and used, sold to a company that, an excavation company or something. So there's a lot to explore, but I think we now have an upper limit on a number. This is what it would cost to do it right now without exploring these other options. So it makes sense, my point is, it makes sense to put it in there, but to explain to the new director that he or she really needs to do some homework, absolutely coordinate with Olson, because they could end up saving us a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand why we'd take it out. I
So-
need to look at it.
So I guess I'm hearing a consensus, or somewhat consensus, that we
Yep.
probably ought to put that back in.
Yes.
So I will do that. Are there any others that anyone has a question on?
That makes more sense. I was confused why you were purchasing less than, you thought it was difficult, not just to look at it.
Oh, one of the others I should point out, Basin Park Engineering, so under 504 capital improvements, non-LLCP. Basin Park Engineering and Design, and I had $41,000 there. That's the balance of McClellan Engineering's contract, all the way through designing it. In other words, there were 4 phases to that. The first phase was their assessment of the condition. I emailed you their report. I've been following up with some of these ones that were, following up with some of these things that we had in the works, saying, I'm leaving, be nice to kind of know where we're at on these. And they sent that report, which I just sent you today.
Right.
So it has a good survey, and they actually did a survey of the park. So it's got some good topo data in there, topographical data. And it also said, as I recall, roughly a 20-foot radius around that, fountain needs to be repaired, and it said immediately, and I think it was underlined, I mean, it said, yes, this needs to be done soon. But we are also at the situation, and Carissa, this kind of is going
I know.
to fall in your lap,
Yeah.
is to do that work. The idea was, because we're going to be busting up all that concrete and repairing the culvert underneath, backfilling, compacting, et cetera, that whole plaza should be redone at that time. Well, part of that plaza is, well, we need to decide where are beds going to go. Are they going to go right where they exist right now, or does it make sense to move some of them? Are we going to move the Doughboy to where it's out of, the view of the stage? Are we going to have benches, railings? There's issues like that. No railings up along the roadside. So,
I think your proposal to have a separate group look at that, it can just be part of, it can fit into or dovetail into the long-term planning, but there's an immediate need. And I think having a separate group and a separate work stream for the Basin Park makes sense. We don't currently have somebody that is kind of over it, but I think we need to have a representation from people, businesses, public, just, it needs to be a cross-representation of the potential interested parties and stakeholders.
I believe we need, for Basin Park, we need at least an initial workshop with a couple of the key players, like, for instance, CAPC would have to be involved.
And city.
Someone from
Preservation.
someone from HDC needs to be involved, and/or the historic, trying to remember his title now, Kyle. Historic Development Officer, at any rate, Kyle.
Preservation officer.
Preservation Officer, Kyle.
And maybe
should be
part of
involved.
Eureka and the community center and, because it's such a core,
Possibly someone from the city council.
yeah,
A workshop of
Main
those
Street. I mean,
two.
I just think all interested parties do a workshop.
I think
Yeah.
for the long haul, for sure. I think for this initial repair, probably the people who we had to get together that agree that going to come up with some money to do the initial repair, because, yes, the whole entire park redesign for sure has to have everybody's
So-
buy-in, but I feel like
You-
if we don't get this group of people together and start at least the ones that are going to have to fund it, get them completely aware of the exact situation.
Yes.
What's happening, what the timing is, and then from there, let that group decide what the next step is.
Yeah.
As opposed to like us
Could-
deciding that, but I think they
If-
need to do that.
If we have our design principles that we're going to keep, sort of certain things the same, such as, I mean, I think the only thing I can think of, it's going to be in the same location.
Right.
Because it's obviously a key feature. You're going to have the same type of stone. I think if you keep those sort of principles the same, we're not going to change that, then that has to then stretch out to the rest of it, and it would be minimal impact. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
So-
Yeah, no, I feel like
and then
this
agree.
is so urgent.
Yeah, agreed.
that,
It could take too long. Yeah.
We need to get these group of people together and everybody at least be made aware of the situation, voice their commitment to solving this problem, and creating a team of the people who can actually make this happen and not just talk about dream world.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, a caving in.
No, absolutely.
It needs,
Giving
it
in is a
needs a
It's a
separate,
bad thing.
it needs a separate task force, separate from us.
Yeah.
He's his own task force.
I
Maybe
agree.
come through the mayor's office, maybe?
Well, and a couple of other things you should all be aware of is, number one, our contract with McClellan Engineering has them doing all of that. Phases 2, 3, and 4
Right.
are, in fact, include things like meeting with the focus group, whoever that's going to be. And so all of that groundwork has been laid. It's just now a matter of, okay, let's get the group together that's going to
Get it done.
to get it done, get a design. There are some things that, like, for instance, accessibility, in other words, it's not going to be just exactly the way the park is right now. There's things like, how do we get people who have accessibility issues up into the park? We need to explore that. Things I've already mentioned. Do we move the Doughboy
But
out
if
of the
we're,
way?
are we talking about, just because I'm getting confused now, are we talking about a task force to deal with the immediate issue?
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, and then a separate group to deal with the overall design, which I think is what's being proposed. And if the task force has the instructions that say, for this particular aspect, we want to keep it as much the same as we possibly can, then that will then flow on to the, everything else doesn't have to be the same, but you're going to have stones put down. You're going to have the railings put back. You're going to have the capstones. If we're saying for that particular aspect, we're going to keep it the same, that would radiate out in terms of your flooring, in terms of your rail. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, but the problem is, you can't really, well, you could, but you're going to end up with more of what we have there, where we have yet another component here, a 20-foot radius around a fountain that's totally inconsistent with everything else out there. The
But
idea that we
Why
had...
would
I
it
think
be
that's what Chris
inconsistent?
is talking.
Yeah, I'm saying it would be exactly, we would try to make it, if not the same materials and reuse them, that our principle would be that things like stone, railings, whatever the component building blocks would be the same. That doesn't mean that you can't do significant changes in the rest of the park at a later date, but your stone, your what do you call it,
Concrete.
pavement, concrete, that stays the same. Because that one design decision then radiates out. Other things can change.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but the issues that I'm talking about are, for instance, if you go out there and you just look at the surfaces, you have up at the front, you have a circular area that's about 6 inches higher, 4 inches higher, and it's pink or something, and it's stamped concrete. And then below that, you have the Doughboy statue, and then you have some gray concrete that was poured around that, and it's gray stamped concrete. And then in other areas, you have 2 or 3 different colors of concrete. And it's because people went in and on an ad hoc basis did these little projects like what we're talking here. You need to do the whole thing so it's all consistent looking. And to do that, you have to address, and it doesn't have to drag on for a year. Get a group together, say, we're going to hammer out these issues. For instance, if the Doughboy is going to be moved, that needs to be moved now before we do this
Okay.
concrete work. If you're going to,
I'm sorry.
if you're going to add a bed for flowers or plants, you need to do that now before you plant concrete. There's been discussions about removing a couple of there's 2 or 3 beds on the surface. I don't mean up at the front, but on the surface of what's really a plaza, the promenade. People stand there for performances or whatever. So there's been talk about removing some of those. So those all have to be decided before you start pouring concrete.
So I guess I haven't been there in a while. I thought it was stones.
No,
It's just concrete?
it's concrete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it could be decided to use pavers.
So-
Pavers would allow some infiltration of the water
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yeah, low
which
impact
is,
development
Could-
stuff would be,
so,
Could we make a list of the key design decisions that we need to make? Because we don't have to make them all now, but if we want to move quickly, to Mark's point, which I get, we can make those key design decisions, and then anything that needs to be done related to that, and then we can sort of defer the other design decisions later. If we don't do concrete, and personally, I thought we had stone, and I think stone would be nicer and easier to repair.
sure.
That might be a key design decision that we need to make now. And again, it radiates out from there.
Yeah.
But the doughboy wouldn't need to be moved if we decided to do that now, would it?
Well, theoretically, if you removed it later and if you had pavers, like what you're talking
It
about,
wouldn't matter.
pavers are easy to infill.
Yeah. So again,
Yeah.
and my question is, I know this is really important, and I do want to follow up on this, stuff we just all said, but it's, this 41,000 that started the discussion here, that's already a contract we have that we're paying
Exactly.
anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yeah.
And then all this other stuff, we're saying, yes, we need to do that for sure, but
But for
Separate.
this budget, the important thing is this number.
yeah.
Right.
I'm not,
But
not seeing it.
I just to, and then we'll move on,
It's
presume.
right
But-
before total capital improvements, under, like, right above the line.
There are things like, for instance, I put in the email that I sent to you all, I don't know if you've all even received the email I sent this afternoon, where I sent the 2 engineering reports. But I made the comment that all of these decisions need to be made before we start doing work on the plaza.
Professionals.
But more importantly, what about the band shell? There's been talk about the band shell being done, and it needs to be. It is a high priority. The point is, we don't want to do these repairs on the plaza and then do the repairs of the, or rebuild of the band shell, because we're going to have excavators and other equipment going back and forth over our brand-new contract, and it's,
Yeah.
or concrete, excuse me, and it's going to get trashed. So it has to be coordinated. I really think you need a steering committee at this point, not one that's going to bog you down, but one that's going to make some
Well,
important,
that's my concern.
fundamental
the
decisions.
the groups that are
So-
paying for it.
Could we do a workshop-y approach, where it's like a one-day, slog and done?
I like
Because
that.
I think otherwise, it's inevitable, doing things by committee, if you're not locked in the same room together, takes a while.
That's why I use the term workshop. I like that idea, just to hash some things out like we're doing here. It's an open discussion and get some ideas, and then you, and the engineering firm will be,
I was going to say, we could ask them
Present.
to facilitate.
and that's part of their contract,
Yeah.
actually. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be, they're supposed to be involved in that
Yeah.
meeting, and that is the next step
I
here,
think a
so.
representative for each of the groups should be there.
Stakeholders.
CABC,
And
city.
really, in my opinion, that's it.
Right.
Let them come out and represent each group with a very detailed understanding of exactly what the problem is,
Yes.
not hyperbole, because this is exactly the kind of thing that makes you get to this point where it's this bad.
That's why, you're
Because
exactly right.
nobody could agree. That's why we
Right.
don't have any parking in town.
Right.
That's why we don't have a lot of different things like that, is because it's talked about a lot.
And no one
People
can
have
agree.
Great ideas, but it just doesn't happen.
Right.
You got to focus, you got to do the whole day thing, you got to walk out of there with somebody who is trained and skilled in walking away with the plan.
Well,
Right,
that
you
would
know.
be a deliverable from the firm.
Absolutely.
Sounds
Exactly.
perfect. So then
That's-
they're a neutral,
Agree.
they're a neutral party, they
Yeah.
can facilitate the discussion, they can handle,
Take the notes, write it down, use the
Yep.
stickies, whatever it takes.
Exactly,
They walk out with a plan,
and
they
walk
walk out with a
away.
plan.
And-
Yeah.
So.
So
anyway.
can we get that, it sounds like we need to get that in the diary soon, January, February?
I would say as soon as possible. I could send an email out to the, in fact, I think the email I sent to you all, I included, I think, the mayor, CAPC, the one or two others that were logical stakeholders. That's not to say others
Said there's not
couldn't
one,
be invited, but I think that would be what you need to do is.
Anybody who has money, that's how.
So I think you need to decide who is essential to be involved in that workshop. But I think a
Chris-
city council member, I think someone from HDC and/or Kyle, CAPC, and then maybe one or two of the local,
I
groups.
think you have to have
There
other-
needs to be somebody from
Yeah.
town.
Yeah, I think you have to have business, I think you have to have residents, I think you have to have, they are key stakeholders, and to get buy-in, you're going to have
Yes.
them involved. Otherwise, we will be, I just think it's really important to get that community involvement beyond just the city people and people with money.
And I think it makes sense that your committee sort of decide that, or at least propose it to the commission, because you're long-range planning.
Yep.
Does it not make sense that she's involved with these groups now and working on the long-range plan to maybe decide when we're going to have this workshop and send some invitations out?
Did you just give me this action? I think if you could reach out to the group, then that would be great. But I think otherwise, I would think the commission should all be there.
Oh, I'm happy to reach out and
Okay.
organize it. I'm just saying
Perfect.
it should be done under the
Yeah, we can
auspices of
actually
your-
get representation from that group.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. So I can get an email out to some, like I said, the logical stakeholders, and there may be more, but it needs to be a manageable group, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
well, I
always
mean, if all commissioners are there, I mean, then it's a public meeting.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, this will be a public
yeah, I mean,
meeting, sure.
whether we allow people to participate or not, but they have to have the right to be there.
Oh, yes.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I would also say to that, sometimes we forget this, but we say members of the public, that's exactly what we are.
That's right.
We're
We are
not
too.
paying for volunteers, we're members of the public. We are representing
That's a good
The
point.
public.
the public. And I think all the commissions, HDC, CAPC, they're all volunteer organizations that are representing
Yeah.
the public. And so we are all volunteers. It's not like we're not and everybody else is,
True.
so that's why we do what we do.
So,
Sometimes that gets lost in the
Oh, I
translation.
agree. I
think
get
it's
distracted
very
with that
good
too, and I was,
point,
I'm representing.
just point of order, because I'm not sure, if it's a public meeting and all the commissioners are there, it would be the voting, same as we do here, right?
Oh, you don't have to do it.
Not
No, you can do it
not
as
necessarily,
Because it's a workshop.
not necessarily.
Workshop, yeah, it's a
Okay,
workshop.
Yeah.
fine.
And also, it only has to be a public meeting if it's more than one commissioner from one committee. If a member of CAPC's there and a member of our organization, or Parks is there, and a member of
okay.
City Council's there, and a member, doesn't have to be a public meeting. Could be, but it
Could
doesn't have to be.
It should be.
It probably still should be, but yeah, it does.
Yeah, but it might make it easier to have just
I
one
think it'd
person
make it
from
easier to
each
have at
anyway.
least the initial workshop without all
Yeah.
that. Just saying.
No problem.
Agree.
Yeah.
Let's see, as far as any of the
All right, let's
others,
stick with this, though.
Yeah, let's go back to our budget.
as far as any of the others, I want to point out 516, human resources and payroll. I did attach the spreadsheet for the payroll issues, and we're up at 500,000. And by the way, I did take that naturalist position out, as much as I think that's so important. It seemed like the general consensus in our last meeting was that's probably something we can't afford at the moment. The only other issue was, money for pay increases in a very high inflation year. Now, I did notice, by the way, I looked at one of the reports, one of the recent governmental reports on pay increases, and pay increases were it was something like, the average cross-country was something like 5.8% for the year. So, inflation has been up around 8 to 9%, but that's coming down. So I think that's why that 5.8% maybe made sense. I just throw that out there as a recent stat that I
Yeah,
heard.
and I also think that we're playing catch-up still.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't start at even with everybody else and then go up by 0.8% but I think we're playing catch-up from years and years and years of neglect in that arena.
Yeah, so the amount that you have in this budget, what percentage increase does that cover, or does it cover an increase?
The increase that I penciled in was I had increased everything at 10%, because inflation had been around 10%. And I thought I had a note in here to that effect, but possibly not. But you could tell, for instance, when I have an amount proposed and current, like just looking at clerk, for instance, current is 16, proposed is 1760, so $1.60. You could do the math and see what the percentage was, but I thought it was 10%.
That would be 10%.
Yeah, there was another one, and I highlighted it in a different color, like executive director. That's all up in the air right now. We don't know who the executive director will be or what his or her pay rate will be, so that's just a guess. Another one, the admin job is, she's currently part-time, and kind of wants to stay that, and it's working well, so I have it penciled in as a full-time. You'll note I have 2,080 hours, so that makes it full-time. That also then means you'll see in the benefits category, you'll see health insurance and those sorts of benefits. So we have a savings there, for instance, because right now our admin assistant is doing well part-time, and, we,
Yeah, and if there's the new director may change that.
Yeah.
And that gives him or
Right,
her
the
the option.
flexibility is very important.
That gives him or her the
Yeah.
option to have that as a full-time position, and I think it's important to have that option.
Yeah, so right now the budget you have is about 36,000 in deficit, but we know there was 30,000 that was set aside for the roads that wasn't spent last year. So that comes pretty close to evening it out. We've put the dam repairs back in, but that was not a huge amount.
Right.
I mean, we're coming out pretty close to equal, even with a 10% increase.
Yeah.
I agree, yeah. And that's why I'm pretty comfortable with this.
Okay.
With adding that 16,000 back in, I feel pretty comfortable now with it. Certainly looks better than what, 200 and something thousand or
Right,
whatever
yes,
that we
yeah,
started with.
yeah.
So I'm pretty happy.
I am too. And just to be nitpicky, you said dam repairs one more time. You meant, we're calling that
The
assessment.
inspection.
Okay, sorry,
I
thank
wanna
you.
make sure.
Thank you.
I know you guys don't
The drain valve.
Thank you.
I don't want someone to listen to us later and go, wait, we still said repairs. No.
Drain valve inspection.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So are there any other questions then?
I don't-
So the only change that it looks like I would need to make would be to move the 16,000 back into the
Yes.
proposed budget. And by the way, to do the final budget, it's a budget. It's, all of these other columns are here to help you sort of assess the
Right.
information. It'll just be the budget column. So when you have your meeting to vote on it, in fact, probably tomorrow I can get this out to you. There's only one change I'm hearing that we need at the moment. And that's the 16,000 for the inspection of the dam. So I could have this done, let's say within a couple of days, but possibly even tomorrow. And I'm not hearing any other changes that anyone's asking that I pencil in.
I think we beat that one.
Hooray.
Round of applause, yay us.
So I'll make that one change. I'll remove things like the highlights here where I've highlighted the ones that I changed, and then I have the column all the way over to the right, shows what the old number was, what I was asking for. So I would urge you to hold on to this for future budget discussions, because the discussion was, when you asked me to move those out, it was not just to take them out. It was that you thought, get a new director in place, see how the year is going. Are we going to be in a deep recession, or are we going to be doing great? And possibly around June timeframe, have a revised budget, and maybe some of these items get put back in there.
Well, I wouldn't, I would say as needed. You know, not 6 months in, not 3 months in, but as needed. And
bet.
I did want to reemphasize that, too, on that, is the items that we're asked to take out were not necessarily things we didn't think were necessary or we shouldn't do at some point, but felt like they could come to us as one-offs, and we could approve it at that time. And this Basin Park thing is a prime example of why it's important for us to have this reserve money when we need it. And because if this could end up being something that we don't have a choice, it's a do or die situation. And had we just already budgeted for everything else, then we'd be in another situation. So for me, it just makes sense for those kind of big items that are important. They're still important. They can just come to us, and we can decide in that moment, giving all the facts of that day,
Sure.
Also,
yes or no.
if we have a more holistic approach to, say, Basin Park or Leatherwood, then you could go for a matching grant, which are easier to get. And we would have, we want X amount of money, a bigger chunk to do all of these things, but we only have to pay half.
Absolutely.
Which is probably a, more effective way of us approaching things rather than piecemeal. So, and if we're going to move forward with the basin, that makes perfect sense. And then possibly we could do something similar for Leatherwood next year, where we add in all the things that we've unfortunately had to take out.
Right. Two key issues that I meant to say and haven't yet were just prompted by your comments. So if I could, first of all, matching grants. I have a note 7 possibly? No. Here it is, note 4. And this was on, I think, professional services. Kylie Heberty's was the previous historic,
Right.
I can't get that title right, historic development officer,
Preservation
preservation officer. And she had some ideas on grants that would help for the dam railing, for the bathhouse. Two grants that are available for that sort of thing. Number one would be for design, and then secondly, there's grants for the actual construction. Those two, Basin Park was another one that she felt, she knew of some grants that she had a high degree of confidence that were, good possibilities that we could get.
Could we
So-
find, oh, go ahead.
So I spoke with her when she was leaving, because she's still doing contract work for the city. So I spoke with her about whether she would be available for that, and she indicated that she would not only be available, but those were projects that, are near and dear to her heart. Those are things that she would love to work on. So your new director needs to understand that when we have some money in for professional service, that's why I put it on a note there, is that I had something specific in mind there, that her work, if it gets us a grant, I don't even know what it would cost, but let's say we spent 10 grand on her, just picking a number out of the air, but she found a grant and it was funded for the $2.5 million that we need for the railing on our dam, that's money well spent. So I think you
Well,
need
yeah,
to
I
direct-
agree, but I'd like to take names off of it. Maybe it's not Kylie, maybe the person comes in, has somebody they've worked with for a lot of years, it's a grant hero. So, but the money to have that person do grants, I totally agree.
Right.
That's, having that as a specific, not a specific, because it is a budget a line item, but knowing that that's why the reason they got that on the budget is good to know. for
Right.
sure.
Well, and I wasn't saying it had to be Kylie.
No, I know,
What I'm saying
but-
is she knows of some, while she was still employed by the city versus just contracting, we were working towards those grants, and she was going to apply for them. So she knows of the grants. She's been out on the physical inspections with me where we were on that. So she's just a bit ahead of some stranger that might come in and
Right.
be hired for that. The second thing, just one last thing, is the other one that can't just be done later is if you choose to do fireworks, because we talked about
Oh, my
possibly
goodness.
fireworks out at Lake Leatherwood. Possibly CAPC would contribute towards it. Perhaps someone else might. But if you don't get that contracted, like in the next month, then it will not
Be
happen.
too late.
So that's not one that you can just kick the can down the road till June and then expect to have a firework presentation on July 4th.
Are we going to assume that's,
Can I ask a question about the Kylie one? Sorry. Just, and then we can jump back to fireworks.
Yes.
Can we ask Kylie for the deadlines for the grants that she was considering?
Sure.
Because we should incorporate that into our planning. If they're 6 months away, that's not very long. If they're 3 months, it's,
Tomorrow.
yeah. So if there are valid grants out there, they're going to have deadlines already, and we need to be factoring that into our horizon. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, fireworks.
I'll ask her. Yeah, and fireworks was just one of those that it's not a decision that can be
Yeah.
deferred
in
indefinitely.
December?
Yeah.
There will be two, possibly.
So do we need to vote on fireworks? Do we need to
So
discuss?
we can't do any of that here.
Yeah, you
anyway.
can't vote, but
We're-
what
It'd
you
probably
could,
have to be on the next agenda if we want to talk about it. I feel like there's just not enough information about,
And it doesn't need to be a voting thing yet, but it needs to be dealt with quickly if we do want to have it. I think after last year, remember we talked about the public wants fireworks. There was some dissatisfaction with it being downtown. I don't know. I don't know how to, whether it be planning, whether it be the person who's doing the Lake Leatherwood position like Juanita's doing now, to just start coming up with a plan, work with the fire department, work with the city.
Do people want them at Leatherwood, though?
That's where we had them for years and years and years, and
Yeah.
it was more of an event, having it out there, having them in town. People could just look at them. I think people liked the idea at first when it was first suggested, but I think in reality, it turned out to just be,
You can't see them.
Right.
well, some people could, but people who are close couldn't really.
Yeah.
And I think and just from my own personal anecdotal stuff, from my customers at my restaurant, they felt like it wasn't an event to go to. They want to drive to Lake Leatherwood, park, get out.
spend the day, have a
Spend the-
band.
spend the day,
have-
do
I
something
will
Yeah.
say
food
in
and
2019,
vendors.
I had a lot of family here, and it was wonderful because I lived on Elk Street, and we just walked down Elk Street a little ways, and where you could see out. And people were all at Chelsea's,
Yeah, it was
people were
neat,
all
wasn't it?
everywhere downtown, but you could see it all from being in town. So it sort of made people come out in town, but it maybe not directly there. Was it at Passion Play, or where was that?
Marble Flats.
Marble Flats. So that was kind of a good
I liked
event,
it too. I live in town. I watched it. I think we should need both.
But I do think this needs to be discussed. There's a lot of details
need
for
both.
that, though.
Yeah, but I'm just pointing out, it needs to be done quickly. It could be a separate vote rather than being in this specific budget, but it's got to be done within the next weeks or months.
Yeah.
Okay.
So possibly to put it on the agenda for the next meeting. That was one thing, by the way, that I mentioned to Steve, and I needed to still show him how to prepare the agenda and work with Ruth to do that. So we'll do that for your next meeting.
And maybe we should have 4th of July question mark on our agenda every
Right.
month from now on.
Well,
So and we can always say, we don't know anything yet. Okay, next, bye.
But I
Right.
would say
We'll see you
that,
next month.
Steve, is there not something that has to happen before somebody is an interim director, or do you
Yes,
just
but
make
he
that
would-
decision?
No, yes. No, we don't. I think what Scott meant was it could come from their office through Stephen right now.
All right.
Scott,
what-
the agenda, you said teaching him how to make the agenda. The agenda would be coming from your office versus from him as an interim director, because we haven't decided he's the interim
But
director yet.
Stephen's not an employee.
so, yeah, so first of all, to finish the thought on the fireworks, it's got to be done soon, and the one issue that I had just as a director and knowing what we're allowed to spend money on, where it was on Marble Flats, that's not even
No.
in the city, it's not Parks property.
Private property.
It's not even like it's being lobbed in the direction of Parks property. I don't believe that that's something we should do. If it's at Lake Leatherwood, sure, that's,
Agree, and that's the big
that's a
decision, is
park.
do we want to do it on Park, does Parks want to sponsor it, or is it a citywide event that the city can work with everybody and ask Parks to help? I mean, we could, but it's,
Well-
that's what I was saying, that there's a lot of decisions that's bigger than just whether we.
Has
have-
Parks helped historically at Marble Flats?
Never.
No.
With funding, not with putting it on.
With
oh,
funding?
no,
Where is
We-
Marble Flats?
it's
Bottom of-
sort of across from Magnetic Spring, but, you know, up the
Oh.
hill. There's a road there that takes you up.
Yeah.
Um,
It's between Magnetic Road and Mill Valley. or-
Mill Hollow?
Mill Hollow Road, yeah, that piece of land there.
Well, the main thing is that we paid for, well, we essentially paid for half of it,
Right.
at least the 2 years that I was involved in actually doing the fireworks. We paid for half, and CAPC paid for half. My question was always, you know, we're out here not on Parks property. And we did also do things like go up there and weed eat the whole area, so there was no vegetation that would, I mean, we did spend hours prepping it, and it was a benefit to the city, so I'm not saying it was inappropriate, but what I'm saying is we're supposed to be focusing on our parks. So, enough said.
Yeah, I didn't know you would put Parks had put work into that area.
And if I recall, it was also because we did wait a little too late to make those decisions. The Marble Flats thing was coming up. Justin was working on how can we do fireworks. Someone had the idea we didn't want to do them in Lake Leather. We didn't have enough money. It was urgent. So someone's got to get out there and pull the weeds, and Parks just jumped in and did it.
Yeah.
It almost wasn't like, it wasn't planned at all. It was just, gosh, we're here. There's too many weeds. Someone better pull them.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it was it was very rushed and
Yeah.
Ad hoc.
Secondly,
Yes,
as far as an interim director, I think I don't think you can get along without that. There are things there are duties that are specifically allocated to the director. In fact, frankly, most of the duties of Parks, and unless there's somebody that's appointed as an interim director who does those things.
Yeah, Butch just sent me an email a little while ago to remind me of the executive session process. So that when we do vote on an interim director, that we follow that. And that we make sure we decide when to put that on our agenda, when to do that. When is our next
Well, we
meeting?
were talking about
2
having a
weeks from
special,
now.
were we not talking about having a special meeting before the 17th?
I think we should. Well, so Scott's, Misko's last day is the
15.
15th,
that
which is a
right?
Friday.
Well, technically, isn't Friday the 16th? My understanding
I'm
is,
looking at the wrong year, sorry.
yeah. It's the 16th. The last,
I was looking at all the 4th of July stuff and getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, it is Friday.
Okay. So, yes, it's a Friday. So then that puts us till, our meeting's the 20th.
and I don't even know if it's possible that I could
Would it be?
stay on for,
I think it's almost more appropriate to have a special meeting to appoint him as interim director, either to take, so that we can say takes place immediately, or,
without an interim director, you have no one to sign contracts, you have no one to sign checks. you
well,
have-
it would be just 1 day, 2 days, if we voted on the 20th, and if we voted on someone, and if it was Stephen, or if it was somebody that, whatever.
How long, I'm sorry, do you mean to vote for an interim director or a permanent director?
Interim director.
Oh, okay.
Between you and Stephen, there would be a couple of days without any director, or Stephen, whomever we choose for an interim director, excuse me. Whomever we choose for interim director or vote in, that we know Stephen is willing and able. There may be other things, we'll discuss them later, but that does just leave us a couple of days without a director or interim director.
Is it a
And you and I
weekend?
can sign checks, so if there's a checks issue, I hate there'd be nobody there as a
And you-
senior person.
You won't be here on the 20th because you're leaving for Christmas.
Right, I will be gone the 20th. I would try to call in. I think I could call in on the 20th, that's, because that's a travel day. I wonder if everybody's going to be around, if we could have a meeting on the 13th or
We can
even-
see about moving up our meeting. Let's talk to Kim and find out when we have availability to do, and email each other.
We're doing the Long-Range Planning Committee 4 to 5 on Thursday. We could do it right after that, if you guys,
This coming Thursday? This coming
depending on
Thursday. I think I
availability.
probably could do
I could do that.
coming Thursday, if we're ready to do it that quickly.
Well, it seems like we do need to act on it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
We need-
if you have a few days without acting directly, it's probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
But if some emergency happens to hit at that period,
Oh.
then you
It's
wish...
not fine.
It's
Yes,
not, it's not a
yes.
good idea.
Well, we'd be able to react and then go vote and count our vote as retroactive to the day before. You know, we don't want to worry about that. If we can come up with a special meeting,
For me, if we could do it on the 13th, that gives us a little time to think about.
we could
I
think about
could do it,
moving
but I'd
our,
have to dial in, or you guys can meet without me. I think we'd have a quorum, wouldn't we, without me?
well, we have the special meeting, and then we also have our regular meeting coming up on the 20th. Sometimes when it's that close to Christmas, you have problems getting a quorum anyway. The 20th, I'll look at the correct year yet. The 20th being our next meeting, so close to Christmas, that's the day we would want to vote on budget.
Right, for sure.
So we need to
Well,
know.
let's do something the week before.
I can dial in.
We could move the whole regular monthly meeting to a different date, just to kind of move it up, that's what I'm saying. Whole monthly regular meeting, include in that meeting the vote on the interim director, and then have it done and not worry about being so close to Christmas. But it would depend upon what City Hall has availability for recording it and all that stuff. There will be a regular meeting that needs to be recorded.
Right.
Okay, can we just check on that, and then we'll go from there and see if we can do it?
Okay.
I don't think it's the end of the world if we, I mean, we're for 3 days without, you know, a director in that seat. I think we could all agree that Stephen could be there as a consulting employee anyway, you know, and maybe, but to oversee things, maybe, but,
Okay,
Well,
I'll
I
check.
could also check with HR to see if I could stay on. I don't know if they've processed the paperwork
yeah,
yet.
I think that would be way more complicated.
Yeah, I think Ruth just signed the paperwork today.
I did just sign it all.
For
You're-
me
you're-
being terminated as of the,
Yeah, that's all
shouldn't say
done.
terminated, sounds like,
Really?
We're going to terminate.
but at any
You're
rate.
done.
What about if you, no, never mind, that's the same process. Ignore.
I was just going to suggest stay on, even if I'm not working the hours or getting paid. And see, I don't know if HR is probably not going to like any
Yeah,
of
they
that.
wouldn't want
But
that.
my point is, I'm available as needed. And it's,
Okay.
you know,
Well,
if you guys call me and need to participate in a meeting or you've got questions, it's not like, I mean, I consider that volunteer time at
Mm-hmm.
that point. Don't hesitate to call.
I wrote a note on my hand to call Kim in the morning and ask her
And
about
I'm just so you know, Ruth, I leave the 14th, and I'll be gone through the 20th and traveling on the 20th back. So that's the reason I was suggesting the 13th, which is a Tuesday, and if we can't get the thing, then I'll try to be flexible and call in wherever we are,
like from Buc-ee's or something
Yeah.
on the side of the road.
wherever I can get a signal.
Okay, that's,
And where are you going?
and,
Texas, all my family's in Texas, so.
yeah, and I just realized we moved our whole family thing up this year a day, too. So technically, that's the day I should be traveling, too. The 20th, rather, going down to Texas. I forgot.
We'll be passing each other.
And I would ask one last thing then.
Yes.
Because I guess this is my last meeting, is that position that, and I think I gave you all a proposed job description for that position. I really think that that's necessary, and even if it can't be funded right away, I mean, please don't lose sight of that. I think it's very important. Our parks, some of our parks, in fact, probably all of them, are really getting overrun by the invasive species, and we're doing some work towards reintroducing a lot of native plants and all that. But we need someone that's focusing on that sort of thing, and also that person would be applying for and managing grants, which should make that position self-sustaining. So I would ask that somebody not let that fall through the cracks and keep bringing it up for consideration when it appears as though the funds may be there. I think it's essential. There's things going on out there that we really need to start focusing on and have somebody that's qualified to focus on it.
And we know from past dealings with surveys and public input and meetings and things, that's a high priority for the citizens in Eureka, is dealing with native plants, dealing with
Yes.
invasive plants and things like that. So it'd be nice to have that part of it too, that's
Yeah.
documented knowledge.
And who knows, maybe there's some grants that could be obtained to help that along, but it's important. So please, it's my one
Let it
request
go.
as I leave is please don't lose sight of that.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to miss you.
Yes, we're
I'll
going to
miss
miss
you
you.
all, too.
Yeah, very much.
Yes, we're going to miss you. Okay, so I think we're ready to vote on the budget at our next meeting, I hope, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Sounds- Any questions between now and then, make sure you reach out to Scott while he's still on the payroll. Ask him questions.
And I'll
For the
get
city.
I'll get the agenda done for the next meeting. We've
Okay.
got 2 weeks, but with holidays and all that. And I always coordinate that with Ruth. But I will, assuming that Stephen is at least going to be involved, even if you don't.
Even if he's not. he'd
Even
be-
if you don't
he'd be working
vote
with the
for
person
him
who
as
is,
the.
so-
Well, that's
as
sort of
the-
my point. Just-
He's the one
Having
that's.
somebody around who's involved.
Yeah, even if he's a consultant, I mean, he's the one that is going to be able to lead a person towards being successful at this job.
Yes. Okay, that's good. And I think we're done pretty much, other than, I'm going to ask questions now quick about our availability. Carissa, you did say that planning meeting is this Thursday, the 8th,
Is this Thursday? Yes.
ending at 5?
4 to 5.
4 to 5.
Yeah, in the Friends Room at the library.
So you'd be kind of available afterwards if we did a special meeting thing? Okay. Anybody else leaving town or going to be traveling other dates that you know about?
I am traveling for work the 13th through the 15th, and I will not be available those days.
Okay. And we are still short commissioners, aren't we?
Too, right?
So keep your eyes on yourself. I've reached out to somebody that hasn't responded yet, but I wish he would. I don't know if anybody else.
What's the procedure? Because I do know someone that's planning to or has applied.
Tell him to go to City Hall and ask him and make the application, and then she gives it to
The council.
Maybe put something out on the Parks
We could do, yeah.
Facebook
Yeah.
thing, because then I'll share it. We could all share it amongst our peer group, and maybe we can talk somebody
Likewise.
to do it. I don't know. I don't know if I'd do that to anybody. but-
Okay. So then it goes to the council, right? And they
Yeah,
vote.
and they vote. Yeah,
Important question. Are there any of you right now that are not residents of Eureka Springs?
No.
Okay, so that allows 2 positions that don't require you to be, or them to
we
be.
have 2 at large or just 1? We have 2.
2 at large. So they can be anyone within the county.
That's
But we would,
great.
I mean, we want them close-ish, yeah?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Berryville.
they need to be able to make a meeting, but
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's good if they have knowledge of the parks.
Yeah.
But they can be a user.
Yeah, Parks user would be nice, or not, or familiar with Eureka.
Yes.
So we'll put something online requesting volunteers for people who are interested in serving on the commission. And I will point out that they don't, these 2 positions do not need to be residents.
I forgot there were 2 of them. I'm glad you said that. I thought we just had 1. I don't know this guy's name.
Well, maybe I'll verify it before we put it out. But I'm rather certain it's 2.
Yeah, I was thinking it was 2.
It probably is. I know there was, a long time ago when they first tried to do it, there was just 1. Then the state said, no, we couldn't do it. And then we asked again. I'm talking a long time ago. And it went back and forth from 1 to no, you can't do it at all, to can we have 1, can we not? Then it became 2.
Well, early on, it might have not been allowed, but the state statute was, well, I don't know that it was changed. The current state statute does allow
Okay.
for non-residents.
Does seem logical, too.
Yeah, there was something years ago where they couldn't. Okay. Anybody, anything else? Good?
We adjourn?
We are adjourned. It is 7:22. Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Dave.
Oh, Mike, do you want to try to get together to catch up?
It's at least a little warmer.
God, not much. Didn't I ask you, Mark, about this person who asked me about the Parks Commissioner, and you said, oh, I know who he is?
Thursday.
Otherwise,
Todd,
Friday.
last name Todd?
Rod Gray.
Rod,
Border.
yeah.
He'd be wonderful.
Friday.
He works at Wonder.
He works at Wonder.
And I left a little note up there saying.
Friday, I'm
he
actually
was like,
supposed to be
"Evie, you
off,
should
but I
help me." Hey.